What's up, YouTube? Ryan Panny here. Hope you guys are doing reasonably well. We are going to talk essential metal today. Dissection's landmark second album, Storm of the Light's Bane. You know, contrary to what you might believe, there was metal music coming out of Sweden in the mid-90s that was not melodic death metal. And I think that considering the importance of a band like Dissection, using the term Swedish metal just to refer to the type of music being created by At the Gates and In Flames and Dark Tranquillity is just kind of dumb. Regardless of where they're from, Dissection are a true blue black metal band in the sense that there is murder, there is Satanism, there is suicide, all nestled comfortably into the band's biography. And much like the early days of second wave black metal progenitors like Mayhem and Burzum and Emperor, there's more criminal activity here than actual music, given the fact that Dissection only released 3 studio albums over almost 20 years of activity. But they are unlike other black metal bands in nearly every way. I mean, the fact that they came out of Sweden and not Norway at a time when metal subgenres were still so regional means that they were always destined to be different than their contemporaries in Norway. And by being different, Dissection wound up making some of the most important music in the history of extreme metal. And while I could likely do a separate video on the Somberlane, their debut, Storm of the Light's Bane, their second record, is going to be our focus today. There are a lot of reasons to love Storm of the Light's Bane, but the main thing that it's known for is its innovation of the beloved subgenre of extreme metal known as blackened death metal, where the subgenres, the prominent and very disparate subgenres of death metal and black metal, mate, so to speak. So this fusion might be taken for granted now, but I cannot stress enough how fucking separate the death metal scene and the black metal scene were from the mid-80s through the early 90s. Separate geographically, certainly separate sonically, separate in terms of the worldviews of the musicians, in some ways separate in terms of influences. They really were different in every way. And now, of course, we're at the point where many years later, the two subgenres not only coexist, but they mingle regularly. I mean, blackened death metal is one of the most popular extreme metal subgenres, and even Apple Music chooses to lump together death metal / black metal as a genre, which more goes to show that their staff is incredibly ignorant in the world of metal, but proves my point nonetheless. Now, were Dissection literally the first band to do this, to combine death metal and black metal? Of course not. I mean, if you wanted, you could argue that in 1985, an album like Celtic Frost's To Megatherion, that's an album that combined really the primitive beginnings of black metal and death metal. But for the modern subgenre that we know and love, the blackened death metal subgenre that when we hear it in 2019, it's instantly recognizable, that can pretty much all be traced back to Storm of the Light's Bane. And so just to sort of catch us all the way up to where we are now in 2019, I'll put it this way. In my opinion, Storm of the Light's Bane is like the Old Testament for the black and death metal subgenre. And you could argue that in the 21st century, Behemoth came along and wrote the New Testament. And we could have a pissing contest about whether that's Demigod or whether that's Thelma 6 or Satanica or whatever. But in my opinion, Behemoth's music is where the term blackened death metal actually earns its moniker, given that a lot of their music is more just straight ahead death metal with a blackened touch, as opposed to the ratio in Dissection's music on an album like Storm of the Light's Bane, where the two are a lot more evenly represented. And that's probably just due to the fact that Dissection has very authentic black metal roots. And this is why I'll always prefer Dissection to the modern wave of blackened death. And people hate me for this, but I really like hearing the two subgenres almost battling it out for prominence. And it just makes for incredibly compelling music when both poles are equally well executed. And to be fair, I have praised the band Hate on the Tremendum record for making it more even. But anyway, I digress. Pretty much everything amazing about this album can be encapsulated by the first proper track on here, Night's Blood, which follows the very sinister intro At the Fathomless Depths. Night's Blood, there are enough changes packed into this song for like 4 songs worth of material. The intro to Night's Blood kicks off with basically that thrash on crack feel that invokes Bloodfire Death era Bathory, and just in general that late 80s period of black metal where the thrash influence and the standard heavy metal influence were pretty much inseparable from the genre. And just note on this song how these airtight, somewhat slickly produced, especially for the mid-90s, death metal and thrash metal riffs combine with the blood-curdling, reverb-soaked black metal vocals to create this absolutely lethal combination. And the production, I mentioned the cleanly produced guitars, the production is something to note here. I mean, obviously, Dissection's music sounds way cleaner and way crisper than Darkthrone's music or Burzum's music or early Bathory, but I'd also argue that on the death metal side, it sounds a lot better than early 90s Suffocation, Tomb of the Mutilated era Cannibal Corpse, although definitely not The Bleeding. That's an amazing sounding record. 3 of the 4 Obituary albums up to this point in '95, Storm of the Light's Bane was really on the cutting edge sonically of all extreme metal, not just black metal. Anyway, note that in Night's Blood, for the chorus here, things shift to more of the melodic death metal universe of Dissection's native Sweden. And then that fucking post-chorus riff, that is absolute perfection. The way the band combined pure groove with those full black metal minor chords, this is where you see that somewhat arbitrary sounding term blackened really take shape. And this part provides the perfect counterbalance for the full throttle blast beats that follow and explains why they bring the part back. And of course, very notable in this track is the incorporation of acoustic guitar in that middle section, which is probably more in the vein of Bathory's Bloodfire Death title track than it is in Flames, but it certainly brings both bands to mind. It's incredibly effective in keeping things dynamic and breaking the song up into an act 1 and an act 2. And the funny thing is all the way up to this point, we're still not at my favorite part of the song, which is that more traditional minor scale riff that happens around the 4-minute mark. This is yet another very quick but effortless transition of mood and rhythmic feel. This is a perfect metal song, guys. This is what a perfect metal song sounds like. It really does not get much better than this. And as the album progresses onward from Night's Blood, you hear the band continue to teeter-totter between the black metal and death metal influences. There are tracks like Unhallowed, which shout out to Black Dahlia Murder for stealing that, which I'd argue lean largely towards the Mayhem influenced black metal side of things. And there's a track like Where Dead Angels Lie, which is more mellow death than anything else, with tinges of black metal here and there. But then there's a track like Soul Reaper, in which Dissection trot out their black metal colors and put them on full display. And this is as clear a reminder as any that this is still a black metal album through and through. And again, it's interesting how bands like Hate and Belphegor and Behemoth have sort of inverted the formula. But this is a black metal album. It's not a death metal album with a couple of evil sounding chords in it. Lyrically, it's certainly a black metal album. I mean, there's a song like Where Dead Angels Lie, which is thematically pure black metal. It's evil, ice, cold, frost, a gloomy sky, a religious concept or being, in this case an angel, being assailed. Not to mention, there is that scream that's a little bit past the 4-minute mark that's just absolutely fucking terrifying. There's the title track too, which more bluntly talks about the death of God. And musically, I mentioned the Mayhem influence. I of course mentioned earlier Bathory, and I'd say that Dissection's approach in comparison is simultaneously at times a lot more vicious and at times way more melodic. And structurally, it's obviously a lot more riff-based and way less repetitive than a band like Mayhem. Really what it is, it's black metal being played with the structure of death metal, and then an equal stylistic influence of both. I should also mention that in addition to Soul Reaper, which is absolutely amazing, Thorns of Crimson Death is also a favorite of mine. The way this song just grooves so hard for the first few minutes and then unloads probably the most intense passage of the entire album. That always makes it near and dear to my heart. This song probably has the most interesting arc in its 8-minute or so runtime than any song on here, and it's full-scale proof that this album is just as good in the second half as it is in the first half. So, Dissection. Incredibly important to the history and development of extreme metal, despite putting out 2 albums in the entire 1990s decade. The Somberland, their debut, is really good too. It draws on a lot of thrash metal, as well as some new wave of British heavy metal influences, again, fused with black metal, but Storm of the Light's Bane is definitely the magnum opus. And, you know, it turns 24 years old next month, and it still sounds absolutely timeless. So, go listen to this one if you haven't yet. It will not disappoint you. And as always, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and are not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so by clicking right over here, as well as checking out any of the other rock or metal related content that I publish here on a weekly basis. Really appreciate you watching, liking, disliking, commenting, just engaging in any fashion. Twitter, Instagram handle @RyanPandaMusic. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys soon.